integrator and gold certified partner. We have some practices in connected systems, custom application development, dynamic CRM, portals and collaboration, and SQL and business intelligence. We also provide some services in business analysis, engagement management, enterprise technology strategy, quality assurance, and user experience. Let's go ahead and get going after that introduction. First, what I'd like to do is go ahead and start with the poll slide, kind of see where the group here as far as search. Go ahead and select if you have a search solution deployed, whether it's MOS, MS Search Server, other search solution, or none. I'll just wait here for about 20 seconds and see what we come up with. I'll let you know the poll results. Oh, here they come. Just in 10 more seconds, guys. And I'll let you see what they are. Oh, in our particular group here, let me go ahead and click this so I can show the search results. Oh, there we go. Sorry about the poll results. So you can see we have, in particular, we have some folks who don't have search deployed. This is really great because most of the topic things I'm going through today is geared toward starting with a fresh plate and how you can effectively utilize search. So, why is search important? Search is important because over the last many years, we have become a search-based culture. Instead of, back in the 80s, 70s, 60s, we didn't have this search technology at our tips. With the advent of the World Wide Web, we have really become, in general, just think about yourself, is when you need a piece of information, what do? You pick up a telephone call? Do you write a letter? No, you tend to go and use search engines like the likes of Bing, Google, and then within your enterprise as well. And also think about, from a business standpoint, how search is critical in the sense that you have a lot of advertisers out there or businesses who utilize search to help get their customers from, say, an advertisement to their website where they can offer their products and services. Often this happens, I noticed this, instead of trying to memorize a domain name, I just kind of get the gist of what the site is about and the name of the site, and I use search to ultimately get me there. So search is really critical. In the past, we had Yahoo in the 1990s. They came up with a directory structure to try to manage all this information that's growing in the internet. And if you're not familiar with that, over time, instead of trying to use a directory, which is more or less like a phone book, they actually gave up and went more toward a keyword-based search. So search is really part of things that we all use. And the best example I have why search is important is my son now, when he's interested in robots, he goes to Google and he's looked up robots using Google. So it's going forward, it's going to become more and more important for us. Well, search is important, more or less, because we got this chart here before you, is that as time goes on, the number of sites and the amount of content, both on the public internet and within your enterprise, is growing. Typically, we see when SharePoint is deployed, the amount of information expands that the organization is using expands exponentially. This is just because SharePoint's a great tool to collect and manage information. Behind that, we have to keep in mind, in order to do this effectively, because this growth curve, we have to think about information architecture and governance, and I'll be going through those later on in the presentation. Another issue we have with search, and often it's used as a solution to a problem that we've run into. I've seen implementations of SharePoint where there wasn't a lot of thought about how SharePoint was going to be deployed, and often search is used to kind of manage that, help pull the site together and help folks find information as to where it's placed. But I want to just point out one thing. This is a case where you're treating the symptom with using search instead of truly providing a a cure. And providing a cure requires some additional, work in the sense of information architecture and governance to help you make an effective search. And certainly you don't want your portal to look like Los Angeles here. Search can also be used, and often is, used as a learning tool. This the ability to go to a search and browse based upon a keyword. And this is done on the internet. It's done on your enterprise in both cases. If users will use search to try to discover what is available in their enterprise or what is available regarding a given topic on the internet. Search is often also used to automatically categorize dynamic content. So if you're putting up structured documents or unstructured documents in your portal and your file shares and whatnot, search has kind of an ability through the use of algorithms to actually, to some sense, categorize that information for you. If it wasn't actually crawled and put in your search index, often you can't retrieve that information. Search can also help with where people put things. Often you get folks who say, they got a document, they know they need to put it someplace, and they can't decide, should I put it in my documents, put it in my email, exchange public folders, where should this go? I always encourage folks, try to get that search information in your SharePoint site. And search can often help, once it's in a SharePoint site or in a publicly available area, that information won't be lost and is now made available for all your users. A thing to consider when you're looking at search and thinking about deploying search is there's more or less two ways to look at it. You have a top-down approach, which is you're looking at how the user is navigating your systems and how they create queries. How do your systems create queries for them? An alternative to that is a bottom-up approach, which is you're looking more at the technology, the extraction process that the crawler uses, and how does your crawler understand your content. And this is a key thing to kind of keep in mind when you're trying to devise a search solution for your organization. And of course, ultimately we focus on search because we want improved findability. Because with improved findability, you're going to save time. And with time savings, it provides a productivity increase for your organization. So search is used to find relevant content. It can be used to leverage the intellectual property that you have. In particular, it could help you with decreasing time to market, how you can quickly get products to the market. In particular, I've been involved in quite a few RFPs over the year, where you get the RFP. I'm sure this has happened to you. It's 4 p.m. It's due the next morning. And how do you gather all this information that you need for your RFP? This is a great case where you can use search for your organization to go retrieve information that has already been created and reuse it and get that RFP out so you can get it ready for the morning. Ultimately, search is about improving ROI, return on your investment, return on investment of your information systems and your intellectual capital, your content. And it's very interesting here. I found these stats that employees tend to spend 35% of their productive time searching for information online. And that's just not, people going out to Google because they're interested in something non-work related. It's about actually retrieving information from your organization's system. Managers, similar deal. They're spending a lot of time looking for information. And the true cost of search, I have this line here, Fortune 1000 companies stand to spend $2.5 billion a year looking, just trying to retrieve and locate information. And imagine if we can solve that problem and get that money back into our organizations and our companies. And ultimately, this slide kind of sums it up very well, the true cost of poor findability. And when I say findability, it's more than just your search. It's how you design and architect your systems, that really can have a impactful result on your organization. These are some, again, some more stats I found available by IDC. That typically your average worker is spending 15 hours a week doing non-productive things, finding and recreating content, and you can see there we have a 38% loss. Wouldn't it be great to get that that information or that effort back in your organization? So that's why looking at search and findability is important. Now I want to cover some items about enterprise versus internet search. And again, I really think this is key because your users have been conditioned by the public search engines, and you need to be aware of how they use those systems. So this background information may fill some gaps about how you effectively deploy a search solution. So for example, internet searches more or less have unstructured content. They're HTML pages, websites, more or less. The website's the container, or the page is the container for the information. And this was all created by Jim Berners-Lee, who came up with the concept of hyperlink back in the, I think it was 1989 he actually came up with that idea. And it more or less spawned the World Wide Web. And as we know today, looking back at history, it's been, it has grown prolifically, right? So public search engines are focused on this problem: HTML, websites, and managing hyperlinks. So in your typical internet search, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get your search result, and they're going to link over to these unstructured pages or content. HTML, HTML, ASD, you guys know them, PHPs. From time to time, in your search results, you'll get structured documents or complex documents like PDF and Word documents, but for the most part, we are talking about unstructured content. On your enterprise, we have a completely different animal. We have complex documents, and typically within a complex document, for example, Word, DOCs, Excel, you're not using links to establish a relationship between two items. You're actually using the content, the unstructured content within the file itself to determine, its relevance for your search. So again, you're dealing with Excel files, PowerPoints, PDF. XML can be in your search results as well as text files. So there's really a big, I want to call it a hodgepodge of content that you're having to deal with your enterprise search. Along that, within your enterprises, typically you also have some structured content. And particularly in SharePoint, this comes in the form of lists, fields, columns, rows, business data. So how do you take these two concepts, a kind of a structured set of data and an unstructured set of data, and make sense out of it? And that's really the thing we're trying to solve with the enterprise search. And again, here's a search result page that you typically get. Again, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets and whatnot, PDF documents. And you can surface business data. Typically, it's coming through in some form of an ASPX page or web service or something like that. Or, of course, people and demographic information is surfaced as well. But you can see here, you can get a pretty varying set of data coming back on your search results. So the next two slides, I think these are really important when you're considering deploying search for your organization. Again, these are behaviors that folks have developed over time, and we need to be aware of them when we deploy search. In particular, internet search, what do folks do? Just think about yourself when you're going and browsing the internet. You go to Bing or Google, you enter some keywords, you then browse the search results. You'll click a link, you go look at it. So you start with the search term, you get a results page, and then you link to sites and pages which more or less tend to be relatively small. I put 100K here, just the idea. They tend to be relatively small, and then you browse that information information for relevant, you browse that page for some relevant information. If you don't get it, you click back, you go back to the results page, and you do it again. You click over to a site, you browse, and so forth. This tends to be the process of going from your results page to browsing for content tends to be relatively quick. Now, on your enterprise, we got a different animal here, because again, your enterprise tends to have relatively large unstructured documents. In this particular case, you're going to search for keywords. You get a search results page, but you get a search results page with a 1 megabyte plus Word document here, PowerPoint document here, and you know how big those PowerPoint documents can get. And you have to, during that time, your browser's loading Microsoft Word up in the background so it can load the document. It's really slowing down the user experience. Although you may have really great search results, just the process of loading these documents can really hamper the success of your search. And in particular with complex documents, when you actually load that Word document, often you have to go Control F, to actually find where it is within that Word document. It could be on page 79 for all you know. So it's not, there's really a kind of a disconnect here as far as the behavior that folks are used to, which is the internet search, versus typically what your enterprise can provide. I want to go through a slide here and talk about something called PageRank. PageRank is the concept is important to understand because, again, it's about understanding what your users are used to. And, again, the animal that we're dealing with on the internet versus the extranet or your enterprise. PageRank was actually come up with Larry Page, the concept, who is one of the founders of Google. The idea is that you use links from sites and use the links. It's almost like a voting method where the relevance of a particular page on the internet is impacted by links to the site. And this is what Google uses and other search engines use as well to create relevance for a particular document or page. So you're really using the population out there of all business internet users to help weight your page. And of course, Larry Page, his ultimate goal is, besides making a lot of dough, is to understand exactly, have a search engine that just magically knows what you're looking for and returning it back to you. So to compare and contrast our two different approaches here, we have enterprise search, which has complex documents, which tend to be large. You have properties you can associate with them. You have columns. You have some structured information that you can take advantage of. I'll cover it later, best bets in authoritative pages and enhancements. You can do some enhancements to improve your search. But one key thing is enterprise search, the results tend to be multi-topic. That means more than one topic per page. On the internet, you just have the pages, the content, typically. You're using title tags and heading tags and links to kind of weight it. It's really a different way of doing it. And often, probably the most structured thing you use is a sitemap. And key here is typically there's one topic per page. And that kind of helps internet search engines really become effective. We have really a different problem to solve within the enterprise. Now, enterprise versus internet, we also have another issue I just quickly want to cover for you, kind of concept to keep in mind, is security. On the internet, this is a chart, or more or less a graph of what user A will get on an internet search. If the crawler does not have access to document 4, it is not going to be surfaced to user A. So our internet searches, more or less, the crawler is an anonymous user and will crawl what it can access anonymously. On the enterprise, we have a different issue that we have to deal with. We have really the concept of security, and we have to have a search engine and method to provide different search results based upon different levels of security. Because you don't want user A getting in their search results document 4 here. Because they don't have access to document 4. We don't want them to even know that document 4 exists. But it needs to be smart enough to know that user B is going to get document 4. And that's something called security trimming that comes with Microsoft Office Search. I'm going to wrap up here real quickly. Enterprise versus the Internet. Often I get this when you go in. I'm sure you, some of you may have experienced this, is if it works on the Internet, why isn't it working with us? You know, if Internet search is so good, why can't we just get a Google search and it will just know, what I'm looking for and provide the results? Again, I've kind of given you some compare and contrast between the two, so hopefully that's becoming a little obvious that there are some differences. So if you provide an Internet search solution to an enterprise, you're going to get different results. It just isn't going to work. And also, on the Internet, somebody may be looking for something, and their truth for what they're looking for could be a little blip in the ocean. And there is this habit with users that if it's not on the first page of a search result, it doesn't exist, although it really may be in there. So it's one of those things is, I got this great quote from Bill Parcells, when you don't know that you don't know, that's a lot different than when you do know that you don't know. So often users just don't even know that something doesn't exist, and they're just not really concerned about it. On your enterprise, you have to contrast this with more or less you and your users. You know more or less that you have information, you have all this information. You got to be able to reach to every corner of your enterprise, security providing, permitting to return the search results. So it's not as forgiving. So to summarize here, we really have two different approaches. You have success for each approach to search. More or less there's two ways. On the Internet, you have an army of people voting. You have an algorithm, of course, but one of the keys here is you have an army of people optimizing their websites, creating links, just magically behind the scenes. This is why it's so brilliant. It is optimizing search in your search results. On your organization, there's just you. You and your information architecture, the technology that you deploy, and your governance of that technology. And so you need to think a little bit different. You're going to have to do a little more work than just deploying a search engine, just deploying the technology. You have to think about information architecture and governance. Real quickly, just want to ask this poll here is how many of you actually have a formal governance plan for your organization? I'll just take about 20 seconds here and wait for any responses. Is my slide coming up? There we go. Here she comes. So I'm going to go ahead and show these results. Very interesting. We have, while some of us are aware of governance, governance is really key. So we'll go into that here shortly. Next little bit I will cover is information architecture and why that's important. Often this is overlooked, and information architecture is all about the design and structuring of information systems that enable your organization with labeling and navigation. And this is often overlooked when you think of search. This is really kind of the cure for improving your search and findability within your organization. Also, when you do information architecture, it can ease the path of moving data from one or content from one system to, say, another system. When you have a coherent information architecture, it increases the comfort of your user because they have a consistent look. They know where to go. It becomes intuitive. And it's also, when users have comfort with your system, it also strengthens your brand. Just think about it. If somebody's comfortable with your system, look at your logo up there in the corner and go, I know that when I'm there, I'm going to be able to find the information that I'm looking for. But the available approaches, just briefly, is as far as information architecture, we have taxonomy definition. That's looking at your metadata, seeing how your information is structured. Process modeling, that's an activity of representing processes on your enterprise and mapping those out, and making sure that, seeing how you can improve them in the future. Information design, and that's the practice of preparing information so people can use it efficiently. Typically, you're looking at audiences and users' purpose. Interactive design, that's, the actual design of how you surface information to people. And just think about, we're now getting into a world where we have all different methods like browsers and iPhones and mobile devices and all different sorts of methods. And just want to point out one thing is, a little key thing here is, after I talk about navigation and wayfinding, actually I'll talk about that right now. Navigation and wayfinding more or less talks about where you are, what you can do there, and where can I go. And I just want to point out one example of where somebody did a really great job with information architecture. If you think of Facebook, do you need an instruction manual to use Facebook? No, you just go there, and it's almost intuitively you know how to operate the application. No. Our goal here at Neudesic and in general is to be able to create systems where you don't need an instruction manual. It's just intuitive and makes sense, and that's what you try to get with information architecture, is get that kind of usability. Information architecture examples, these are just a few examples of, type of artifacts that are created when you go through the process of mapping this out. And you get process flows, flow diagrams, wireframes, and whatnot. I'm sure some of these are familiar with you guys. And finally, also, we have something here called a context matrix. By making you look at your sites and, I don't want to say forcing you, but making you actively kind of categorize it and putting in the who, what, when, and why in this grid, kind of forces you to think about how your systems are developed, your portal is deployed. It helps you get more one-topic sites. And often this process can eliminate extraneous pages that aren't effective for your users. So. And finally, information architecture is all great. So you come up with a plan, you understand how you're going to design your information systems, how you're going to design your portal. Without governance, which is more or less the sets, the responsibilities, the processes that you put in place to manage it, to build it and manage it, more or less, I don't want to call it an enforcement mechanism. You need governance to keep your portals from not becoming this. Governance avoids moss sprawl, and often SharePoint is deployed, and search is used to try to correct it and fix this problem. You start trying to crawl this, and use search to fix this problem. And what I'm suggesting is, start from the beginning, make sure your information architecture and your governance is in place. All right, now let's actually get to talking about SharePoint and some of the things that SharePoint provides and Microsoft technology provides for your search, enabling your search. One key thing is metadata, managed properties, content types. Those are really key. We'll go through some search scopes, talk about business data catalog, the latest infrastructure update. We'll touch on federated search, and an often overlooked thing, which is search reporting and tuning. This is an important feedback mechanism for you, and I'll speak about that. Best faceted search, I'll touch on those, and I'll also chat about two solutions, enhancements to Microsoft SharePoint Search that we have found to be very effective in solving some usability issues. So when you're thinking about enhancements, I just want to take this moment and talk about it as we go through all these examples, is be careful when you're doing enhancements to SharePoint. Be careful that you don't I don't want to say don't do it, but just be aware that there are some products that actually completely replace the underlying Moz search. You are using a completely separate indexing engine. And just be aware of it and be careful of it. Because due to upgrade paths and other web parts and just the ability to leverage the Moz search index and the community out there that's developing solutions for it, it may be better just to stay focused on Moz search and enhance it and not try to do a replacement. So let's talk about metadata, in particular columns and columns and fields within SharePoint. Yeah, I see I have a little starburst there. This is really key. You really, in order to be effective using search within SharePoint, especially as your sites grow, you really need to think about how am I effectively going to use metadata within my search, and how am I going to tag content. More or less, this is use columns to tag your content. Often this is overlooked. And again, from an information architecture standpoint, this is where you think about what your metadata and what your columns are going to look like. So for example, here we have using project type. You can use that metadata both within Word or within SharePoint itself to help you categorize information and tag it. Because once you have it tagged, then you have lots of tools that allow you to enhance your search. So, manage properties, and more or less this is how you do it. I got a screenshot here of a more or less site columns. And using site columns, when you have a site column, and once it's crawled, it becomes available as a metadata property, or some folks call it mapped property. And you can map it and then utilize it within search. So you got site columns which contain your metadata. You then add those site columns to content types or lists or document libraries. The crawler comes by, picks them up, and once they pick them up, you can then utilize them in search. And just this simple little diagram, understanding this, will, really gives you the ability to really enhance what you're trying to accomplish within SharePoint and searching your enterprise. Now, given that we have, metadata is so important, and properties and content types are important, if you have a large implementation, the governance and consistency of that metadata sometimes can become a challenge. How do you enforce that consistency? How do you have that controlled vocabulary that applies to all your portals and all your sites? Typically, you see folks try to do this manually. They go in and they go into site settings and they go into site settings, go to site columns, and try to manage it from there manually, or they use solutions. But I just want to point out there's a systemized way to do it with a product that we've been successful with. It's called Schema Logic, and it actually will help you manage your metadata. And this, I think, is really key. Do you think about how are you going to manage and keep your metadata consistent? Because once your tagging becomes inconsistent, it can be more of a challenge for your SharePoint search results. Now let's talk a little bit about content types. And I want everybody out there on this call to say, I will never, ever, ever deploy a document library and just use the default Microsoft Office content type. Just say no. I had a client I dealt with who, more or less, that was their approach. They deployed SharePoint. They had all types of content, different content types, but they didn't understand the concept that when I put them in SharePoint, I have to specifically state that this is a particular content type and it has associated metadata or workflow associated with it. So at a minimum, I would suggest always think about putting documents, have documents created as content types, because once you have them in as a content type, you now have metadata or managed properties that you can search against and create enhanced searches. So, for example, if you have a portal that's grown over time, you have, the portal here, you have sub-sites, And this particular client actually had a document called a letter of engagement, and they just put it in his Word document. And so it gets, as you can see in this diagram, this representation, you start getting letters of engagement sprinkled around your portal. How do you pull these all together and be able to create search results based upon these? What happened was, you got search results that just, you couldn't pull the LOEs out. And because there's so many LOEs, it just kind of created a lot of noise. We solved this issue by creating a specific content type called an LOE. And once we had that, it was very easy to exclude LOEs from search or just create a specific LOE search using a scope. And here's an example. Is you go in and edit your managed properties, make sure that content type, see the arrow there, allow this content type to be used in search scopes. Once you do that, then your users, your site administrators, can then create a search scope based upon that content type, and you can include it or exclude it. So it gives you a lot of capability. And I hope I have you thinking now about how important, thinking up front, what are my content types going to be? What's my metadata going to be? Because if you just throw it all in there and you try to pull things out later, you can run into some challenges. All right, enough about content types. Let's talk a little bit about the Business Data Catalog. This came out with MOS 2007. And what, more or less from a search standpoint and a findability standpoint, this allows you to surface business data, line of business data, within your search. So whether you have a CRM system, SQL, SAP, Oracle, web services, whatever it is, the Business Data Catalog allows MOS Search basically to provide that structured information to your search. And I have some examples here of some things I've done, is just kind of give you an idea of kind of try to have you think outside the box. Imagine having data in, for example, a CRM system, and using that CRM system, I'm able to create an advanced search, a search result. Say, for example, here, I want to know all the sales that are coming in, or potential sales that are greater than $100, or I guess $10,000. So I can create that query, and if you're not familiar with SharePoint search, you can create alerts and RRS feeds from a query, from a search result. So what this allows you to do is surface, actually have the search engine itself prompt you, alert you that there's some new content that maybe you need to address. So, because what, if you're not familiar with, again, with SharePoint search, you search results, built throughout SharePoint are RS feeds and alerts, and whether it's a list, a search result, you can create these RS feeds and then have it search or surface within Microsoft Outlook. So I know every morning when I come in, I just click that and I'll see all the new contacts that have been entered in CRM. I don't have to even go into CRM. I'll just know it immediately right there in Outlook. And conversely to that, you can also just have alerts. A new contract for, say, over $10,000 now has come in. I can get alert that that's actually come through our system. So search is more than just looking at things through a browser. Just consider, how can you surface search information? You can do it through alerts. You can do it through the browser. You have it in Office applications. You have an RRS with an RRS reader. You have the API. You have web services you can call from other applications. It's a very capable and dynamic way to retrieve information. And in particular, we've seen some success with using search to replace roll-ups. Consider this. Say you have a really big implementation of MOS where you have, say, 300 sites with task lists all over the place. And you want a roll-up to summarize that information within the task list. Consider using search to do that instead of a roll-up web part. If you're not familiar with roll-up web parts, depending upon the size of your portal, they can tend to be slow, but search, the rendering speed for that will be coming out of the index. It can be very quick. So here's a way to solve not necessarily a search-specific issue, but allow, this very creative way to surface information for your users. Finally, we have the infrastructure update. This came out last year. It provided a unified administration dashboard for your users. So if you have mock search, we encourage you to even get this implemented. It also provides federated search. And federated search, if you don't know what that is, allows you to pull in outside search results. And this can be, Google, Bing, whatever it is. I like Wikipedia. That's always a great one to do as a federated search. But you can also have a federated search which pulls out outside search results coming from your SQL data sources, which is a possibility. All right, we're now quickly going to talk about search reporting and tuning. This is the one item that often is overlooked. Let's go through this flow, and I think it will make some sense why it's important to go look at your reporting and your tuning. Typically, a user searches. From those searches, SharePoint, the SharePoint search will gather statistics based upon the queries and the results that are generated. Now, based upon that information of how the users are searching, it is really important that you think about how do we adjust our search. And you can adjust your search through something you use best bets, which is more or less targeting a search result or an item for a big given keyword. A classic example is, actually I'll show you in a moment what a good example of that. You can use search scopes to create different search pages to help folks find information. You can create advanced search screens. But more importantly, through the search results, you will know if you have an information architecture issue and if you need to make an adjustment. Because from those search results, you will know if you have really good metadata and really good content types. So, for those of you who don't know, this is a screenshot of the infrastructure update as it's employed. But down there on the lower left, promise me if you have, if you have SharePoint deployed, a search, visit this page. Visit this once a week and see what your users are looking for. It will be very insightful. Because what you find on this page will be more or less the volume of search that is going on, but also what they're looking for. And you can find out what they looked for and what they didn't find. And using that information, you can make an adjustment to your search. Just installing search and not thinking about it and just, fire and forget. If that's the approach, over time you can find you're really not serving your users well. Here's an example of a best bet. I just want to show you this. You can see the search term there was medical, and we could target a term like medical. We could find that our users are searching for medical all the time, but because benefits, say, doesn't necessarily weight that word well, that they're not getting the search result. So by looking at the search results, looking at the search reports, you can then know, hey, if somebody types medical, more times than not, they're looking for benefits. And then you can target that information for them. Quickly, I just want to go through that when you as just a SharePoint admin can take advantage of search and its customizations. Typically, many folks have the idea that they always have to go to IT to make an adjustment. I want to state that within SharePoint and SharePoint Search, you can leverage scopes, best bet, have separate search tabs. You have the ability to actually modify the search to serve your users at the site collection level enhancement. So going forward, please understand you don't have to go to IT in order to enhance your search. Finally, let's quickly talk about faceted search. Typically, if you're not familiar with that, I'm sure you've seen it out there on the internet. Facets more or less means categorization, and typically it follows that keyword search and browsing methodology that folks, or usability that folks are used to. So they enter a keyword, They drill down some facets, and then they browse what they see. Here's an example. If I was looking for a LCD screen, I do the initial search for LCD screen, and then based upon current offers, I can drill down based upon current offers. Faceted search we have found to be very effective at helping folks find content within their portals. The types of faceted searches that are available for SharePoint are, of course, there's one on CodePlex that we often use. And the key thing to take from here, if you don't have good content types and site columns and using managed properties, faceting is not going to help you. You really got to get that good metadata that faceting allows you to leverage. Finally, I have two more items here to discuss. These are two third-party enhancements that I've used over the years. The first one I talk about is Longitude from BA Insight. Certainly, if you're working with SharePoint Search, it's definitely worth a look to see what they provide and see if it can help you. They have their own faceted search, and through that, your learning curve tends to be shorter. What's nice about this enhancement is you keep managing search as you always would. They have an excellent preview, which I'll talk about in just a minute, that has made me a hero with a client. They have wildcard searches out of the box. SharePoint doesn't have wildcard searches. And they have a great paramedic search, which is a nice replacement for the advanced search. Works really great. So again, look at Longitude from BA Insight. Real quick, I want to talk about previewing. BA Insight has an ability, they have Longitude creates previews of the complex documents that are maintained in your portal and in your document libraries. And so in this example of a search result, you would search for something, but just by moving your mouse, by clicking the item, you will get a preview that's an SVG file, which is a scalable vector graphics file, within your search results. And what is key about this capability right here is in line with the habits that users are used to. They are used to going to search engines, typing a keyword, and then browsing for content and determining the relevance of that content based upon just viewing it quickly. Without this little browse here that actually tells you where the keywords show up in the pages, users have to open the document, download it, open it, and then search using Control F. And so that's where that frustration comes in. So certainly take a look at Longitude from BA Insight. Another third-party enhancement is Ontoloca. They have some excellent web parts. They can address some of the similar things. They have a capable advanced WSS search. If you're not familiar with search or WSS, it doesn't have moth search per se, so they have an advanced search that you can utilize on WSS sites. They have a faceted drill down search that's very capable. They have a metadata search, a federated search that's a little more capable than when you get with the infrastructure update. And that's something called quick filters. Again, the idea is to allow people to, it's kind of a variation on faceting, allow people to quickly reduce the result set so they can do better browsing. And down below here, they also have grouping, which often helps folks search, group their search results so that they can find the relevant content that they're looking for. And beyond that, they also have a picture search that you become accustomed to on public search engines like Bing and Google. So that's available as well. And excuse me, it seems my Microsoft live meeting connection has taken a nap. So Katie, can you forward me to the next slide, please?
Yes, I can. You're all set.
Okay. Actually, I came back. I'll do wrap up here. Got a couple more minutes. I'm sorry, I can't tell which slide I'm in. Can you go to slide 60, please?
You're there.
Okay. Slide 60, more or less, here's the thing to keep in mind is internet searches, you have to think about your users are accustomed to internet searches. And you, with your SharePoint deployment and your enterprise search, you need to think about what are the tools and what are the things I need to do to get an effective search for the habits that a user has. And typically, it's the Moth search, you have enhancements, you have information architecture, and governance that you can utilize. And I want to stress, you see the gears here, information architecture and governance are the largest gears. This is really the key, is that's where you start. And from that, you create metadata and managed properties, and then you get to the technology. So be thinking information architecture and governance. With that in mind, I would like to just let you know we've had some previous webcasts that are related to governance and information architecture, but governance specifically. Back a month or so ago, Ron Rolfs, he did a governance webcast, and if you're not familiar with governance or what it is and how you use it, I would encourage you to go to the shared insight section on the Neudesic website, Neudesic.com, and look at that webcast and listen to it. It's an excellent presentation and give you a good overview of what governance is. Also, user adoption. We had in this series a webcast based upon about user adoption and how you be successful with your adoption for your Moth or SharePoint 2007, and that's available there as well. An excellent presentation. And finally, I want to let you guys know we have a free offer for you, for those of you attending today. It's called the SharePoint Health Check, and this is really, it's an important thing for your findability and for the use of your portal. Is more or less what we do. We come in one day, and we will go over these items and create a health check or a scorecard for your organization and its implementation of Moth. This includes architecture, governance, disaster recovery. You can see the list there. And if you are interested in having a health check, I would encourage you to email me, walt.hodgson@neudesic.com. And depending upon where you are and our available resources, we will make arrangements to come out with you for one day, and we will go through your Moth implementation and how your information architecture and all these items, and we'll be based upon our best practices and our experiences, we'll be able to give you a really good look at how you're doing regarding your SharePoint deployment. And with that, I think we're at the end of the presentation. I got 1 minute to go. And with that, I will be taking some questions here at the end.
Great. Thank you, Walt, for this great presentation. We did have a few questions come through. First question, can you use metadata with documents in a file share?
Can you use metadata with documents in a file share? To some extent, yes. However, it would be the default metadata properties that come with, your Office documents, and typically, you go to properties and you can edit data there. Typically, users don't surface those, don't edit those very often, so we do not encourage managing metadata from there, although it can be done. We always encourage you to, if you can get things out of a file share into a SharePoint site, we can crawl it, we can assign, give it a content type, and from that, we can get better search results and findability. So when in doubt, we always encourage you to get things out of file shares and get them into SharePoint sites and document libraries for a more effective search.
Great. I know we're right at the hour mark, but we did have one last question. Does fast search replace the Moth search?
Fast search replace the Moth. The current version of FAST is a separate, it does have its own separate search engine per se. It will crawl SharePoint, and you're able to surface the information normally in SharePoint using web parts. But to answer your question, it is a replacement. And I must say, Fast Search is very exciting. It is one of the most brilliant things I've ever experienced as far as what it's capable of doing. And I'm very excited about the Office 14 or 2010 and how Microsoft, they're going to implement it in there somehow. And I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that.
Great. I believe that was very helpful information. In the meantime, I am going to click through a few polling questions, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. Those of you who are still on board. First polling question, was this content helpful for your business? Yes or no? Give everyone just a few seconds. Next question, please rate the presentation content. Excellent, good, poor. Thank you everyone for your feedback. Much appreciated. Question number 3, would you like us to schedule a follow-up? Yes or no? Everyone who attended today will receive a follow-up email with a recorded version as well. Great. Well, if there are no further questions at this time, I would like to thank Walt again for this wonderful presentation. We will be forwarding out the recorded version, like I said, in about a week's time. If you have any further questions about this presentation or Neudesic in general, please feel free to email either Walt or myself at the email address provided on the screen. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on our next Neudesic webcast. You are now all free to disconnect.